Okay, let's dive in. We're taking a deep dive today into a stack of news reports. They're all covering a really tragic event that happened on Memorial Day, May 26, 2025.
Right, in Philadelphia, a mass shooting during a large gathering.
Exactly. And our goal here, as always, is to just pull out the essential facts, the key insights, straight from the source materials you've given us.
Yeah, we're looking at articles from quite a few places, people.com, AP News, CBS News, Philadelphia, NBC 10, The Independent, even some video transcripts from FOX 29 and CBS Miami.
And the key is, we're sticking only to what these reports tell us. No outside info, no taking sides.
Just reported facts.
So let's set the scene first. Memorial Day evening, people are out, cookouts, celebrations. The location, according to all these sources, is Lemon Hill. That's in Fairmount Park, Philadelphia.
And it sounds like it was a really significant gathering.
Yeah, the reports consistently mention approximately 1,000 people, a huge crowd enjoying the park.
But then, just before 10:30 p.m., everything changed.
Yeah.
The sources are specific. 911 calls started pouring in at 10:07 p.m.
Right when rapid-fire gunshots just suddenly erupted into that crowd.
And the aftermath described sounds like, well, just complete chaos.
Absolute chaos. People running, panicking, trying to get away, abandoning cars.
And some reports even mentioned cars crashing because it was dark. They noted, the driveways there aren't fully lit.
Makes sense. The response, though, sounds like it was immediate and massive.
Oh, yeah. Those 911 calls brought a huge police presence, highway patrol included, and ambulances were dispatched quickly, trying to get help to people fast.
And then there's the human cost, which is just awful.
Yeah.
The reports state 11 people were directly hit by gunfire.
That breaks down into 2 people killed, tragically, and 9 others injured.
The 2 individuals who lost their lives were identified in the sources as an adult man and an adult woman.
And some reports actually give their names and ages. Amia Devlin, she was 23, and Mikhail Bowers, who was 21.
So young.
Mm.
And the injured.
9 others injured. We know from the reports that 3 of them were teenagers, ages 15, 16, and 17.
Wow. And the others?
The other 6 injured were adults, with ages apparently ranging up to 28.
Okay. There was one sort of positive note mentioned consistently.
Yes, that all the wounded, thankfully, were reported to be in stable condition when they reached the hospitals.
And they were taken to several different places, right? Like Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, Penn Presbyterian, Temple University Hospital.
Lincoln No Medical Center, too, yeah. Spread across the city.
And there was one other injury mentioned, not from gunfire.
That's right. One report noted someone else was taken to the hospital, but it was after being hit by a car during all that chaos, the panic as people fled.
Okay, so shifting from the immediate impact to the actual scene and the start of the investigation, how did the reports describe it?
They called it a very, very large scene, spread out, across the park area. And it still showed all the signs of that big gathering, picnic tables, food, drinks left behind, barbecues.
And the next morning, in daylight, the picture became even clearer, it seems.
Yeah, the reports talked about discarded items everywhere, trash bags, snacks just dropped, shoes scattered all over the grass. A real sign of panic.
Shoes left behind.
Yeah.
That really paints a picture.
It does. There was also a sort of specific detail about a porta-john. Its door was open, mentioned as potentially relevant somehow to the investigation, though not explained further.
Interesting. And the police commissioner, Kevin Bethel, he spoke early the next morning.
He did. Gave a briefing, and he really emphasized the challenges they faced right away.
Like the darkness.
Exactly. That was a huge factor, especially, as we mentioned, the lack of streetlights on some park driveways. They had to bring in floodlights.
And he also pointed out, didn't he, just how hard it is to investigate when shots are fired into a massive crowd like that?
Absolutely. Just the sheer scale and the circumstances.
So a large police presence stayed there.
Yes. Remained at the scene well into the next day. The reports detail a pretty intensive crime scene effort.
How so?
Well, they mentioned 3 different crime scene unit teams were working there until about 3 a.m. overnight. Wow.
And then they came back in the daylight to keep collecting evidence. Specifically described as, scouring the grass, looking for clues, especially bullet casings.
And Commissioner Bethel, he seems to be the main official voice in these initial reports.
Right. And a key piece of information he provided as of the time these reports came out was that no one was in custody yet.
And no weapons recovered either.
Correct. No weapons recovered from the scene at that point.
Okay, so how are they trying to piece together what happened? Who did it?
Well, a lot hinges on those shell casings they were collecting. The reports say investigators are examining them closely.
Figure out what? Like number of shooters, weapon types.
Exactly. Trying to determine how many shooters might have been involved, the caliber of the weapons,
Yeah.
that kind of forensic detail.
And the commissioner mentioned something about the sound of the gunfire.
He did. He specifically highlighted the rapid-fire nature of the shots, said it was even noticeable in some videos people posted on social media from the event. Okay, and this rapid-fire point seems pretty significant in the reports.
It really does. Because based on that, Commissioner Bethel said the police are, and this is a quote, pretty confident that a gun switch was likely used.
A switch. The sources explained what that is.
Yes, they were careful to define it. It's basically a small device, a modification that can convert a semi-automatic handgun into a fully automatic weapon.
Meaning it just keeps firing incredibly fast.
Yeah, one report gave a stark example. It could allow a weapon to fire something like 17 rounds in less than 2 seconds.
That's terrifying. And the reports linked this to a broader issue.
They did. Agents from the ATF, that's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, had apparently recently told CBS News Philadelphia that these Glock switches, as they're often called, are showing up more and more in shooting investigations across the city.
So not just a potential factor here, but a growing concern generally.
It seems so. One source even mentioned there's growing worry among U.S. lawmakers specifically about these devices.
Okay, so besides the physical evidence like casings, what else are police looking at?
The reports say they're also reviewing social media, other digital information, looking for any leads there.
And those abandoned cars we talked about earlier?
Right. They were towed. The sources state they were towed specifically as evidence. Investigators need to figure out, did they belong to victims or maybe to someone involved in the shooting?
Makes sense. One report mentioned a specific car.
Yeah, a crashed Hyundai was specifically noted as being investigated for a possible connection.
All right, let's shift gears slightly. A couple of the sources included some broader context alongside the details of this terrible event.
Yeah, this was interesting. Despite this mass shooting, one report made a point of saying that Philadelphia, leading up to May 26th, was actually seeing its lowest homicide level in a decade.
Really? Lowest in 10 years. What were the numbers?
The report cited 91 homicides reported year-to-date up to that Monday, which it said was down about 13% compared to the same period the previous year.
Huh. So a noticeable drop.
And they put it in historical context, too, saying the last time the number was lower at that point in the year was back in 2014.
Wow. And they mentioned that even if you added Monday's deaths.
Right, even if you included the 2 deaths from this shooting, plus another separate shooting death elsewhere in the city that day, which one source mentioned the total would still apparently be the lowest for that period since 2015.
So the bigger picture was quite different from this single event.
It seems the sources wanted to provide that perspective. They mentioned that from 2015 through 2024, the city had over 100 homicides in the same time frame each year, peaking at 200 back in 2021.
So a complex picture. The reports also mentioned other incidents over the weekend.
Just briefly, a couple of reports noted other separate shooting incidents elsewhere, like in South Carolina, and also an incident where a vehicle hit a crowd at a Liverpool FC parade. Just sort of placing the Philadelphia shooting within the context of other news happening around the same time.
Okay, so if we just stick strictly to what these sources told us, pulling it all together, there are still some pretty big questions left unanswered, aren't there?
Definitely. The reports are very clear on this. The motive for the shooting. Still unknown at the time they were published.
Right. Motive unknown. And while they're working on the casings.
The exact number of shooters isn't confirmed yet in these sources, nor are the specific types of weapons used beyond the suspicion about the switch. That's all still under investigation, according to the reports.
And there was that one detail about the statistics.
Yeah, one report specifically pointed out it wasn't actually clear if those lower year-to-date homicide stats they cited already included the deaths from that Monday, May 26th. A small but potentially significant point of clarity missing. Okay, so let's quickly recap our deep dive into these sources on the Philadelphia Memorial Day shooting. We've laid out the reported facts, the what, when, where, Lemon Hill, late Monday evening, the huge crowd. We talked about the immediate chaos, the panic, the large emergency response.
Then the heartbreaking casualties, Amia Devlin and Mikhail Bowers, identified as the deceased, the 9 injured, including teenagers, thankfully reported stable.
Right. We covered the scene itself described as vast, the remnants of the gathering, the signs of panic, and the investigation starting, the challenges like darkness, the crime scene work, searching for those crucial shell casings.
And Commissioner Bethel's initial statements were key: no arrests, no weapons recovered yet. but that strong suspicion about a gun switch being used based on the rapid fire.
A suspicion the sources linked to broader ATF warnings and lawmaker concerns about those devices. We also noted the review of digital evidence and the impounding of abandoned cars.
And finally, we touched on that broader context provided in some reports, Philadelphia's homicide rate being at a decade low, presenting a sort of counter-narrative to this specific horrific event.
So this whole exercise was about drilling down into the details provided only by these specific news reports you shared.
Exactly. Purely source-driven.
Now, thinking about how this was all reported, across the different articles and clips, what really strikes me is that mix. You have these incredibly raw human details, the panic, the fear, people running for their lives, leaving shoes behind, just visceral stuff.
Yeah, human tragedy side.
But then right alongside that, you get the more technical, almost detached details of the investigation. Examining shell casings, identifying specific weapon modifications like switches, towing cars as potential evidence, citing statistics.
That's a really interesting point, that juxtaposition.
So the final thought maybe for you listening is, what does this blend tell us? This mix of immediate human suffering and the methodical, technical process of investigation, all presented together in the news. How does that shape our understanding, maybe even our processing of events like this?